Hi everyone, it's Chris Drake here again from Ignata Finance, and today for my next session in my 6 Questions With series, I'm joined by Tony Bickerstaff. Tony was the CFO at Costain for 14 years, during which time the group underwent significant transformation and achieved consistent profit growth. Today we're going to be discussing the importance of investing in people. Tony, great to see you again.
Thanks, Chris. Good to see you.
Likewise. So to kick off, why is investment in people so important for a business and for the CFO?
Well, look, as you said, throughout my career, I've always worked in businesses where it's a little bit trait, but the people have been the best assets within those businesses. And therefore, what you have to do as part of the development of every business is you have to spend time, effort, resources, money on ensuring that your greatest asset and the people are really growing with the business and developing with the business. So there are 2 primary reasons that you should do that. First of all, it's so important that the people in the business, as I say, develop themselves in line with the way the business is developing. So that might mean new skills for them, that might mean different areas of a sector or whatever it might be, and you've got to help people do that and invest in enabling to do that. The other thing is that I've always found that part of the motivation for people and part of their own personal reward is this business is willing to invest in me and my development. So the payback you get from that, if I put my CFO hat on, the payback you get from that is huge. People feel good about working for organizations if they feel like they're part of it, part of its development, and people invest and the business is investing in them. And that doesn't have to be pounds and millions of pounds on training. It can be little things, and we'll come on to what those little things are. It's just getting people feeling like the company is investing in their own, whether that's their well-being or their training or development, is nothing but good in my view for the business and therefore the CFO. So
would you say that's the connection that person has to the business, to their team?
Absolutely. And you'll know this better than I do, but most of the reason that people leave organizations is because they don't see the next opportunity for them in that organization. That's the reason they leave, and not because of some of the housekeeping factors. Generally, it's because, well, actually I want to do something different, or I want to, I feel if I do that over there, that would be good for my development. So that's the reason that internally you must invest in the development of people, because otherwise people will vote with their feet.
I couldn't agree more. As a finance recruiter for almost 23 years, the number one reason for leaving and motivation for moving on from pretty much everyone I've spoken to, it tends to be sort of personal development and career progression. That's the reason why people would speak to recruiters in the first place when they're looking to make a move.
There's another dynamic here, and that is, there'll be a lot of, almost everybody that kind of listens to this will have some form of managerial responsibility looking after people. And I tell you, there is nothing better and more proud than seeing people development, seeing people move to, on to better things. Nothing has made me more proud in my career when I've moved on and done other things. Is the successor that I've helped develop take on my role. Nothing more proud than that.
Absolutely. I hear similar from other sort of CFOs, and whether people have sometimes had to sort of move on to develop their career or what they've subsequently achieved. But I think it is that investment in people piece. Just out of interest, the obviously sort of recent developments in society sort of for us all. How has that investment in people had to change during the pandemic, and will those changes be permanent?
I think investment has fundamentally changed in the last 18 months for corporates. We've moved away from this kind of formalized training type program environment to one where it's number one, investment in communication. I think that the organizations that have done this well during the pandemic, and there are many of it, have upped their level of communication considerably. And also noticeably, I think, communication at a kind of human to human level. Communications where we've had a little window into people's worlds, and that's actually created a really positive environment for communication. So I think that's been a fundamental change in how you communicate. You know, for example, what I did very early on in the pandemic was just create with my team, you know, twice a week, 30-minute max, quick call, you know, twice a week that said, what's happening this week? You know, how many people have we got on furlough? You know, all those kind of things. And just keeping on and making it really snappy and sharp. It was absolutely regimented to us. There's not going to be longer than 30 minutes. We've got a pretty tight agenda. And it was just a way of keeping people up to date, giving people the opportunity to say, well, I think, you know, we need to think about this. Right, okay. And I think that kind of methodology is here to stay without a doubt regarding communicating. And I consider communicating with individuals as part of the investment in them. You know, because investment is about time. The other thing, of course, we've seen is a huge opportunity regarding online development and online, you know, self-development. Massive. You know, the area that, you know, the number of available topics that you can join online and all those kind of things has exploded. Of course, that must stay, because from a time perspective, you know, it is so much better for me to join, you know, an hour's conversation about something without all the hassle around traveling and everything else. Absolutely. And I think that's absolutely here to stay. You know, I'm part of a board academy that went completely online, and that will stay online in terms of, you know, briefings about things, briefings about latest, you know, developments, whether it's technology or data analytics, whatever it is. And I think that form of learning and investment will only continue. The other thing I think changed is I think it's always been there, but it's been heightened during the pandemic, is this self-motivation point around personal development. You know, if you're like a lot of people working at home, the self-motivation required to help you see personal development as part of your day job, I think is really important, because it's easy to get bogged down in the day-to-day and doing this and doing tasks and stuff like that, and find yourself without the time to do a bit of personal development. And for organizations to allow, again, a form of investment is allowing a bit of space for people to be able to do that. And I think all of those organizations that have done this well have done all of those things, and that will absolutely continue.
Absolutely. It's an interesting point you make, just I guess on the online sort of training sort of facilities and the personal development sort of side of things. I guess it's for a lot of people, the working from home, a lot of people have more time to reflect. You know, and in the same way that I guess lots of people are having work done on their properties. Again, it's to have development for themselves and their professional careers.
Yeah, and often it's been, you know, what and we'll come on to some of the things I've done, but things like I said to people, pick a topic, you know, as long as that topic is relevant to your organization and relevant to the way the business is going, and it's an opportunity to do a bit of learning around that topic, you know, a little bit like when you were back at college and you know, there was a bit of, you know, I'll find out a little bit more about that and a little bit more about that. Pick something and do that. You know, nobody's stopping you doing that.
Absolutely. Out of interest, what are the potential repercussions for organisations that get this wrong?
Well, I think there is a couple here. There's the obvious one, which is around remoteness.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, organisations in the last 18 months have had to create an environment where people are not feeling remote. You know, particularly those that are joining organisations new and haven't had that opportunity to mix and meet people around. You know, that remoteness thing I think is really important. And where that will manifest itself is in some of the cultures, behaviours and values. You know, it's pretty hard, but not impossible to, you know, get across your culture, your values, etc. on a call like this. But it's obviously easier if you put people in a room together and talk about it. So I think there's that risk. I think well-being, I think people's health and well-being, and you know, it's a topic that's very dear to my heart, which we'll come on to. But you know, if we get this wrong, then there's potential, impact on people's health and well-being. Working at home is not for everybody. Absolutely. I have a lot of empathy and sympathy for those with families at home that have been trying to do schooling and everything else. That's been tough for a lot of people. The third one, I think, that's excuse me, that I think organizations need to be very sure about is we've got to avoid this kind of almost two modes of activity within a business. Okay. So if I take Costain, 65 throughout the pandemic, 65% of the workforce was still going to a place of work.
Okay.
So there's been a lot of talk about working from home and remote and all that kind of stuff. But hang on, 65% of people, it's not changed for them.
Yeah.
In fact, some cases it's easier because there's less people and less people on transport. But we mustn't forget that. There's a lot of people who are still going to their place of work. And we can't have this kind of, like I say, kind of two-tier, two-mode where, there's some home workers and some remote. But by the way, that doesn't apply to you because you're on the front line doing physical things that you have to go to your place of work. So one of the key things is going to be not lose sight of that, because that could be a potential repercussion where it's almost we've got one group of people that go to their place of work and we've got another that don't because they work at home. Whatever companies do, they mustn't let that divide, be created.
It's a really interesting point, actually. And so, from a, I guess, personal sort of motivation, how have you personally motivated your team over the last few years? And what would you like to share on that sort of things?
Yeah, the 2 or 3 things I've done is I've always encouraged people to be part of the bigger picture in terms of the organizations that we work for, understanding the kind of strategy and making sure their own personal contribution is part of that and their own personal investment is part of that. That people want to be motivated by the success of the organization. Again, my experience is organizations that are successful, lo and behold, permeates through, and you've got more motivated people if they're successful. Funny that. But where you can get the maximum out of that is helping people feel like they're part of the success. So it comes back to this investment point. As you said, in Costain, over the period of time, we were strategically making quite a journey and quite a change. So I encouraged people to be part of that in terms of the skills that they had, not only fitted where we were, but do they fit where we're heading? Because the business is evolving, the business is changing. And if they don't, you better make sure they do. That's always been a big thing. The second thing is, I've always encouraged people to volunteer for stuff. I said to people, you'd be amazed that how progressive it is for you as an individual and the business if you volunteer to do stuff. And I know you're busy, and I know you've got lots on your plate, and you might go to meetings and think, oh, please don't let me have any actions out of this meeting. I've got enough to do. But you'd be amazed how rewarding it is for you personally if you're the person saying, do you know what, I'll get that done. I'll do that. It's amazing. And that whole volunteering thing extends beyond just the workplace. It's a big motivational piece to volunteer, in your local communities and all that kind of stuff. And there's lots of opportunity to do that. Always encourage people to do that, because again, I just think that's so healthy for the organization and for the society, but also for the individual. So those are some of the different things to try to help people, stay motivated in their role. Big picture, I think, is one of the most important things. To avoid people just like head down, got a bit of a task to do. What else is going on around the business? Not sure. Give them the bigger picture. I think that really helps. Absolutely.
No, I think that sort of really leads into that kind of the buy-in, the connection, but also somebody you're going on the journey together. But also it's that personal career development with the business as the business developing as well. Funny enough, I came across an article in CITAM last week, and it was all around sort of how employee motivation is changing. And there's part of some research that had been carried out was away from the kind of the financials and it was more by far number one was around sort of team, people, and culture at 45%, and followed very closely by flexible working at 39%. which shows you how sort of motivation is changing what people's priorities are these days as well. We touched on it slightly, but I'm aware you led mental health and well-being at Costain. Now, why as CFO did you decide to take on that additional role?
Yeah, what happened was that we as an organisation put a lot of time and effort into the safety of the environment, the working environment, the workforce. Given what we did in Costain, which is infrastructure services, so we were doing a lot in relation to well-being, but it kind of sat a little bit subsidiary to some of the other things we were doing, like safety, for example. So I was kind of the voice around the board table saying, look, this is so important for some of the reasons that you talk about in terms of motivation, etc. We've got to kind of elevate it alongside some of these things. And of course, what happens in this world is the CEO said, no, you're right. That's an excellent idea. You should do that. So you know how the world works. So I said, look, of course I'll do that. I'll just be the champion for that. And all I really did was kind of give people the empowered people and gave them permission to do a huge amount of what they were doing in terms of, people's mental health, people's well-being, personal connection. We did some stuff around, so I introduced mental health first aiders at the same level as normal first aid. We offered all of our line managers mental health awareness training. We already had flexible working in. But what I did was took some of the kind of rules and procedures away from it, funny enough, and just said, look, the fundamentals here is we want everybody to come to work and be at their best. Okay? Because if we can do that, the business will be at its best. It's not complicated. We've got to attract, retain, and motivate the very best people. So let's try and help them be at their best. Because if we do that, the business will be at their best. Oh, and by the way, we're not necessarily going to put a whole rules, regulations around that. We'll create a framework to help you do that. But as you say, some aspects around well-being, flexible, are quite personal. What's important for some people is different for others. For some people, flexible working might just mean that enables me to drop my kids off at school in the morning.
Yeah.
And that's what it means for me, because that means I haven't got to start before then, and it gives me that flexibility. Others, it's different. Others, it's actually, once a month I want to go and do sailing or something. I don't know. So you've got to create an environment that enables that give and take. And I felt very passionate about that. And I said, look, I will just, like I say, what I did was really bring together a lot of the great stuff that was going on in the business to help people do that. And the good news is, so I started that 3 years ago, something like that. And of course, when we got to the pandemic, a lot of that stuff we were all of a sudden having to do for real. Flexible working, all of those things, how you motivate people remotely, all of those things. We were doing for real.
No, absolutely. It's funny enough. I was just about to ask to put it into context when you took on that role, because it would give us a bit of sort of a frame of the timeline, really. So no, I think it's really relevant and actually really interesting. In terms of some of the research I came across last week as well, I think they did some research with senior executives and business owners, and they've overwhelmingly prioritised employee wellbeing above most other sort of factors. So that was at 76%, just in terms of that sort of research that was carried out, which shows, I think, the wider kind of appreciation for this now as well. I just want to change tack slightly and just discuss sort of help for young people. I think I've mentioned previously my wife has worked with the Prince's Trust and has done for the last 14 years. I know that you've supported them previously. In your opinion, what role can charities like the Prince's Trust play in the people agenda?
Well, I think there's a whole host of things they can do, Chris. As you say, they've got an increasingly important role, and specifically, there's a couple of things that they can do. And I know the Prince's Trust, and as you say, done some work with them along this. Firstly, is to help the connection between young people, education, etc., and the workplace. The more people we've got helping create that connection, i.e., how you make that transition from being, it doesn't matter what age it is, from being in full-time education to actually going to a place of work and doing full-time work, has got to be a good thing. It's got to be a good thing. And that starts with, and this is where I did some work with the Prince's Trust, just the interview process, just helping young people with the interview process, how you come across, because it's just about communication. So much of an organization and business is about communication. It's the vital skill, and that starts with your interview with an organization. So that's certainly a really important place where charities like Prince's Trust can help and create that environment. The second one is this is a two-way thing. I come back to what I said about people development and motivation, that they can help create opportunities for business to help out and feel good and all those good things. So in Costain, as well as the Prince's Trust, we did a lot of work with Macmillan and with Samaritans and those sort of, and we spent time with those organizations, and we gave people the time and the flexibility to go and do that. And it was fantastically rewarding for them and ultimately for us, So again, that two-way thing and creating that connection, and I know some of the charitable bodies struggle with that. Oh, yeah, but we're a charity, you're a corporate, our worlds are different. They're not. They're not that different, and we've got to bring them together. And if we can bring them together better, that will help young people find the right jobs, find their way into the workplace. So vital role, in my view.
Yeah, fantastic. Tony, really, really interesting. It's been great to see you again, and thanks for sharing your insights and perspectives with us today.
Okay. All right, Chris. Brilliant. Thanks a lot.